Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So we're going to start the session, today's session in the afternoon with the presentation of Professor Adélia Sequeira. Professor Adélia Sequeira is a full professor from the IST, or Instituto Superior Técnico de Lisboa. She's a very active researcher. She's an expert on the field. It's very difficult for you to try to publish something on hemodynamics without citing one of her papers or one of her books. So it is very nice for us to have her presence here because, as I said, she's very well known in the world of mathematical modeling in hemodynamics and cardiovascular mathematics. She has some books. She's going to give you some reference, but if you want to take a look, for example, she has a very recent book that is called Hemomath, the mathematics of blood, and she has many papers, and it is an honor to have her here. So thank you, Professor, for accepting the invitation. The room is yours.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. Here it's also afternoon, 3 hours plus. It's raining here, so perhaps you have sun there. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Professor Giovanni Grappiglia, for this invitation. Thank you, Professor Elias Godinho, for inviting me also. We have been working, me and Elias, for a long time, and so it's a pleasure to be with you and for this invitation, and I hope you will like my lecture, because so I've been working on applications of mathematical modeling to biomedicine in the last 20 years. And I think that I will work until the end of my life on this topic, because there are still many open problems. And I hope that you, so the students who are attending this lecture will be motivated to work in the field, because there are many things to do. You know, everything which is related to our body is very challenging, and there are and the collaboration with medical doctors is incredible, challenging and motivating. In particular, now everybody is interested in solving the problem of COVID-19, and you know that COVID-19 is a multi-organ disease which also affects the cardiovascular system. It affects in particular, it affects the respiratory system, as you know very well, but also the brain, the liver, the kidney, and other organs as well. But the cardio, it is there is an interplay between COVID-19 and the cardiovascular dysfunction and related diseases. So there are already many people. There is already many people working in. You can see that there are many papers, because there is money for research in the field of COVID-19, and so many people is working in this field, not only from the biological point of view, but also mathematical modeling and simulations, trying to solve it. So we have already the vaccines, but we are I'm not, but I have colleagues who are working also. We are who are already working on mathematical modeling for the relation of COVID with cardiovascular diseases. You see, so because there is a relation. Okay, so but I'm not going to talk about that. So these are the main topics. So I have been working in different with several collaborators. Here you have Elias, that you know very well, and Cassio, who is going to talk tomorrow, and others that I have been working with. and in several topics, blood rheology, blood coagulation modeling and simulations. I put in green here the application that I will be concentrated on at the end of my talk, blood flows in cerebral aneurysms. But I've been working in atherosclerosis, in arthropathies, in bicuspid aortic valve patients. And this last topic is the topic that I've been working with Professor Elias on the mathematical computational modeling of drug dilution dissolution applied to coronary stents. But coronary stents are important also to treat the problem of atherosclerosis, everything, and also to treat the problem of cerebral aneurysms and so on. So everything is in fact related. So why cardiovascular diseases? Why modeling cardiovascular diseases? Because it's in fact more than cancer. It's the leading cause of death in developed countries. And the simulations of blood flow, behavior, and applied stresses help to understand several diseases, to optimize surgical procedures and design medical devices. And in particular, let me mention some of the most important. So atherosclerosis, everybody knows what it is. There is an accumulation of fatty materials, fibrous elements, and calcium in the intima of the arteries. So you know what is cholesterol, the LDL, so the bad cholesterol. These are the causes of the atherosclerosis, so the accumulation of the LDL cholesterol. And then high blood pressure can also be a cause, and smoking. So these are collateral causes, and the consequence is the narrowing of the vessel wall, the blood vessel, and the narrowing of the vessel wall here. And the consequence also is a heart attack and stroke. So the problem is that the blood flow cannot, the blood cannot flow in the normal conditions. And in order to solve the situation, either there is a surgical procedure or the introduction of a stent. You can see here how the stent is introduced here. So this study of stents and the drug-eluting stents and all the procedure and how it works, it's very important. But stents are also important to study the problem of aneurysms, and I will be concentrated on aneurysms at the end of my talk more in detail. What are the aneurysms? Aneurysms are of two different types. It's a dilation of the arteries. They can have a fusiform. They can be fusiform if they happen in the aorta, so they can be like this, or then they can be saccular if they happen in they happen in the brain, the cerebral aneurysms. So the vessel stretches and becomes thinner, and the problem is that when they rupture, they can cause hemorrhage, and the person can die if they rupture and without a big hemorrhage. There is not a big problem, but in principle, if the hemorrhage is very large, so there is in fact so the problem of rupture is very dangerous. I will talk more about this, in fact, so I will not go into details here. So this is also this is a slide that I like to show. This corresponds to a study done by a student that we had the arthropathies in the bicuspid aortic valve patients. So instead of having 3 valves, the heart has 2 valves, and then the aorta is dilated and deformed, and so the circulation, the blood circulation is not well done, and so there are so the patient, usually this is a congenital problem. So children are born like this, and they need several surgeries when they are small, and up to the age of 12, they are treated in pediatric hospitals, and later on they are treated during all their life, because this is a problem that usually is not solved, and they have problems during all their life. So the problem of the arch of the aorta, there are malformations and dilations. So, and we have studied this in detail. This is only some pictures of that. Okay, so something about motivation. So why this is a bifurcation of the carotid. So why are we interested in studying this? In fact, what we can obtain, so in a blood vessel, there is blood, and there is blood circulation. Blood is a fluid, and there is also the arterial wall. And what can be measured is the velocity and the pressure. But with the velocity and the pressure, we cannot obtain all data which is important for to study the hemodynamics of the fluid. Hemodynamics, hemo means blood, and dynamics, you know what it is, the dynamics of the blood. And this is the main indicator of the cardiovascular diseases is not the velocity or the pressure, but the wall shear stress. And the wall shear stress is the tangential component of the traction on the wall, which is given by this expression. This is the viscosity of the blood, and this is the stress, and this is the normal derivative and restricted to the wall. So this cannot be measured. So we need to solve the equations that give the velocity and pressure, and then we calculate the wall shear stress. And by doing this, then we have an indicator, and this is an indicator of atherosclerosis. This is an indicator of possible rupture of aneurysm, and so on. So it's important to model blood flow, to have the geometry, and so to do the simulations to obtain the velocity, the pressure, and then as a product of that to calculate the wall shear stress and to give the results to the medical doctors. But in order to do that, we need to have a good model for blood. This is related to the blood rheology. And then the interaction to the vessel walls, to have a good model for the vessel walls, to take into account that the geometry is quite complex. The geometry of the blood, the circulation, so the circulatory system is quite complex. It's a closed system. And that we do the simulations in 3D, but only in a very small region, because this is computationally very demanding, and that this local flow dynamics that we do in 3 dimensions as an impact on the global flow dynamics and vice versa. And so we will treat, not in detail, but give you some indication about this in some slides. So this is a cartoon where you can see how this works. So we are interested in mathematical models, of course, and in doing the numerical simulations and in the dialogue with the medical doctors. But in order to do that, we need to work with real patients and with real data and with real geometries. So we need to obtain images from the patients, it depends on the kind of disease we are treating. Here it's for the bifurcation of the carotid, okay? It's not for an aneurysm here, it's for the bifurcation of the carotid. So we have geometry, then we need to reconstruct the image in order to study the to use a mathematical model in a geometry that we can treat from the mathematical point of view. And so there are techniques for the treatment of the reconstruction of this geometry. Then there are techniques for mesh generation, because for the numerical simulations, to use the numerical methods, we need to, I don't know how much you know about these, but there are the numerical methods. You have finite elements, finite volumes, and so on. And so you need to decompose your geometry in 3D, for instance. You can do simulations in 2D, but in fact, your objects are three-dimensional. So you need to use a mesh, and so to decompose in small tetrahedrons. Of course, this is done automatically by some solvers. But so this geometry should be decomposed in small tetrahedrons, and then if it is a 3D geometry, it's not easy to do, and there are automatic, so there are solvers which are open source that you can use. I will talk about that later. But so then you need to formulate the mathematical model, to have the geometry, and then to set the problem, let's say. So the geometry, a mathematical problem in a convenient and appropriate geometry. Then I'm talking about 3D geometries, but then you can work with reduced order geometries. In fact, I will talk about that. You can work with 2D, 1D, and 0D models, because you cannot solve the all circulatory system in using a 3D model. But let's suppose that you have a 3D model. Then you solve for velocity and pressure, and then you obtain the wall shear stress by the expression that I have shown in the previous slide. And then you need to have a good visualization of the results. And of course, you don't show to the medical doctor a list of results, you show pictures. And he likes to see pictures, and he likes to see from the images if it is similar to what is predicting. And so the clinical interpretation is fundamental, and sometimes so we need to go back and see if there is something wrong, and change the mathematical model, change the numerical method, and change the procedure of medical image acquisition, and so on. So there is a complete this is something that we need. In fact, this cannot be done by one person alone. This is procedure that is done by a team, that involves not only a medical doctor and a mathematician, but also engineers and so on, if you are solving a problem which is quite difficult. So it's something done by a team of researchers working in a field. Okay, so don't be afraid, but there are several teams. If you go on the web and you visit teams working in the field, you will find several very successful working on these topics. Okay, so one of the issues is blood rheology. Blood rheology is so what is blood? Is this a Newtonian fluid or a non-Newtonian fluid? We can consider blood as a Newtonian fluid, like water, if we consider blood in the large vessel like the aorta, because there we can ignore that blood is composed by the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets floating in the plasma, and so we can consider it as an homogeneous fluid, and in fact ignore the presence of the particles. But in fact, blood is a non-Newtonian fluid because the viscosity is not constant. And if you think about the blood flowing in smaller vessels, and large vessels, you have only aorta and the veins, you have vena cava, otherwise the others are smaller vessels. The viscosity is not constant. Here you have constant viscosity, and here is the viscosity is not constant. It's decreasing with the shear rate. And so because the red blood cells, they have, when the shear rate is decreasing, they have the tendency of so they aggregate when the shear rate is higher, then they disaggregate and they form like ellipsoids. And then due to this fact, the viscosity decreases. And so this is a characteristic of the non-Newtonian fluid, the shear sealing viscosity fluid. So red blood cells aggregation and deformability. Okay, so this picture is from real blood, and here this is a cartoon. This is not from real blood, but this is real blood. So here you can see the red blood cells aligning in the center of the vessel. This is a venule, and this is a white blood cell deforming and entering in the vessel, and so this is a capillary, and this phenomena is called the Farios-Lindquist effect. But I will not go into details. Okay. So other characteristic of blood that makes it a non-Newtonian fluid is the nonlinear viscoelasticity, because the blood cells are covered by a membrane, and this gives them an elastic behavior, elongation and distortion of the rouleau, and it has a nonlinear creeping behavior, stress relaxation, normal stress effects that I'm not going into details. But in order to detect this behavior, it's necessary to do it in very special conditions, in the laboratory, in very special conditions, and using rheometers to detect the viscoelastic effects. So many times these nonlinear viscoelastic effects for the simulations, they are neglected, and blood is only considered as a inelastic So the viscoelastic are neglected, and it is considered only a shear sealing, so inelastic fluid, non-Newtonian inelastic fluid. So the two easier models are the Newtonian, which is modeled by the Navier-Stokes equations, and the generalized Newtonian modeled by the some models that I will show next. Okay, blood can also exhibit other non-Newtonian characteristics like the shear sealing depending on time. It's called thixotropy. These are just names for those who studied a bit of fluid mechanics. And the yield stress. Yield stress is like toothpaste, for instance, or mayonnaise, or so it's necessary to exert a certain stress in order to make the fluid, to see the fluid flowing. So some experiments show that blood can resist shear, behaving rigidly until a critical level of stress is reached. So this is called the yield stress. Above this value, blood appears to flow like a fluid. Of course, you know, these experiments with blood can be done only if you had some chemical to the blood, because you know that if you put blood in a container, immediately it coagulates and you cannot see anything. So, and if you put some chemical in the blood, you change the properties. So you cannot do these experiments by yourself in the kitchen. This should be done in the laboratory, this kind of experiments. So don't do with the blood of a chicken in the kitchen. So or your own blood. Your own blood, it's better not to try, okay? So these are shear sealing blood flow models by curve fitting to experiments. So some values to experimental values to some models. So you have the power law model. So the viscosity is not constant in these models, all these models, and all these models can be used for blood. So this is called the power law. This is the Powell, I think, the cross model, the modified cross, the Karo model, the Karo-Yasuda model. And all these models are more or less equivalent and can be used to model blood. And these are the simplest models that you use if you want to consider blood as a non-Newtonian fluid, so to model blood in smaller vessels than the aorta, for instance, okay? If it is in the aorta, you can consider the Navier-Stokes equations. Let's look to the Navier-Stokes equations, but first, as Professor Elias was saying, so I wrote a book with Professor Antonio Fasano. So this was, you know, it seems like yesterday, but it was already 4 years ago, 3 years and a half ago. But it was a book that took us 5 years to write. But it was published in November 2017, MOMAT, Mathematics of Blood. It's a nice book. In fact, in each chapter, there is an historical introduction about the people who studied the different topics, and it's interesting, even for those who are not expert in the subject. So, and these are chapters, some chapters I wrote also with some co-authors, other chapters on blood rheology, but these are those that I consider the best. That's a long time ago. Okay, so this is about blood rheology. And so here are the modified Navier-Stokes equations. So Navier-Stokes equations, this is the density, this is the velocity, this is the nonlinear term, this is the pressure, and this is the divergence of the stress. And the stress is not directly proportional to the deformation tensor, because here the viscosity is not a constant. So the viscosity depends on the shear rate. And you see that the shear rate so is given by this. And you have here the viscosity law that I have chosen for my simulations, but we could with these parameters. According to the table I have shown you, you could choose another one. So in these equations, there are two unknowns, the velocity and the pressure. This is an incompressible fluid, so you have here divergence U equals 0. And these are simple equations and the simplest non-Newtonian model that you can consider for blood, in fact. Then you can consider also viscoelastic models for blood, like Oldroyd B, PTT models, and so on, more complex models for blood. And so then the calculations are more difficult. But then you need to consider also that blood is flowing in vessels that have a wall. And the wall is also very complex. The wall has several layers. The endothelium is the one which is in contact with the lumen. The lumen is this part where the blood is flowing. And then this is the endothelium. Then you have the tunica. The tunica intima, the one which is in contact with the endothelium, is the first layer. Then the lamina, the internal elastic lamina, this one. So the tunica intima is formed by several layers, and then the tunica media and the tunica adventitia. Of course, if you want to study biochemical interaction between blood and the wall, for instance, to study atherosclerosis, then you need to work with models that take into account what happens in this layer. So, for instance, here you see a plaque of atherosclerosis here. But if you want just to study the mechanical interaction between the fluid and the vessel wall, you neglect what happens from the point of view of the biomechanics. So only the mechanics is important, but not the biology. And so then you consider a linear or a non-linear elastic model for the wall. Of course, you know that the wall is very complex, but we neglect the complexity of the wall and we consider a simple model for the wall. But in that case, it's only the mechanical interaction that is considered. And here, just to show you how it works, so we have here the bifurcation of the carotid. This is the inflow boundary. This is two outflows boundaries. The blood is flowing here. This is the external wall. So this is the wall. Okay, and so here you have a generalized Newtonian flow, generalized Newtonian fluid for blood. And for the deformation of the vessel wall, we consider an hyperelastic model where eta is the wall displacement, okay? This is the stress, and rho is the density of the wall. Of course, this is to couple. We need to couple the fluid with the vessel wall. And in order to couple two models, we need, so we have a model for the wall, a model for the fluid. We need coupling conditions. We need, or interface conditions. And interface conditions means continuity of the stresses and continuity of the velocities, velocity of the fluid and velocity of the wall displacement at the common wall, okay? And more than that, we need initial and boundary conditions at the boundary, at the boundaries. So, and this is the simplest that you can do. And you see that in order to couple this is not easy because this is a fluid and this is a structure. And this is written in Eulerian coordinates. This is written in Lagrangian coordinates. And in order to couple this, since this is written in different coordinates, and when you pass to the so the reference frame is always changing. When you pass to the simulations, numerical simulations, you need to change the frame at each time step. And in order to avoid that, there are different possibilities, but one of them is to use the so-called arbitrarian Lagrangian Eulerian formulation that I'm not going to talk about here. But these are the equations already modified in the arbitrarian Lagrangian Eulerian frame. The result is to introduce a domain velocity called W that is introduced here. And if you do that in a complex way that I'm not going to explain here, if you modify the equations by introducing this domain velocity, then you don't need to remesh at each time step, okay? And the equations are written like that. That's why it appears this W here, which is the domain velocity. Okay, so, but this, all of this is something that cannot explain in 1 hour. So, interface conditions. This is written in, since one is written in Lagrangian, the other in particular, this comes from the Lagrangian, this comes from the Eulerian. We need to modify using the Piola transform and write it in a different way. So the condition, so it's here. Okay, so now for the coupling. Blood or considering Newtonian or non-Newtonian, and the deformation of the vessel wall, which we can use different models, but a 3D nonlinear elastic model or a 2D shell type model. So we can do the coupling in different ways. So we can do in a staggered or partitioned way by solving, for instance, for the fluid, then injecting the result on the structure, then solving for the structure, injecting the results through the boundary conditions, then injecting the result on the solving for the fluid, injecting on the structure, solving for the structure, injecting on the fluid at each time step, and then by the coupling conditions we can solve the problem. There are many problems still here, open problems at the level of the well-posedness of the fluid structure interaction. Still, there are many problems which have been solved, others are already solved. But in particular, what is the main problem here is the efficiency of the numerical algorithms, because this is very demanding from the computational point of view. The numerical algorithms do not converge easily. That it's needed a very small time step in order to get convergence. And for this ALE formulation. And so we have studied this for a non-linear, for a non-Newtonian fluid. We have used this strategy of using for the fluid discretization in time using an implicit Euler scheme, in space stabilization P1 bubble, P1 finite element, and for the structure midpoint numeric method in time and P1 finite element in space, and a fully implicit coupling based on a Newtonian algorithm with the exact computation of the Jacobian. So this is fluid structure interaction. Okay, so there is another, this is for the partition, so-called partitioned approach. So I was talking about the implementation issues. So there is another, there is the so-called monolithic approach and partitioned approach. I was talking about partitioned approach. What is the difference between monolithic approach, partitioned approach? This partitioned approach takes advantage of using the best solver for the fluid and the best solver for the structure. The monolithic approach, in the monolithic approach, you build a complete new matrix, a complete new system for the fluid coupled with the structure. You build a new problem, and you don't have, so the coupling conditions are involved in the system, and so the system become huge, and you develop a new solver, but you don't have problems of stability. In the partitioned approach, you use the already known algorithms, but you have troubles with the coupling algorithms. Nowadays, with the development of the algorithms and the fact that there are we use parallel algorithms, and the solvers are much better than a long time ago when this has been discovered. The monolithic approach has been used for a long time, but now the partitioned approach became again used because the fact that we are using very small time steps is not a very big issue. You see, so both are used, in fact. So it depends on the taste. Okay, so now talking about so-called geometrical multiscale. So I already told you that, so if we want to solve the 3D problem, we don't take into account the whole circulatory system. We only take into account a small portion. And we should think that this is not the whole circulatory system. It's only a small part. And the 3D model is only for the region of interest. And we need to couple this with a network of models that account for the rest of the circulation. And this is the thing that so we call this the geometrical multiscale. Geometrical multiscale allows to take into account the global circulation in localized regions and set proper, of course, coupling models implies always that appropriate boundary conditions are considered. So we use 3D models. The use of 3D models mean that there are very detailed simulations, complex and computational, very costly. Then we couple, so it's here. Then we couple with reduced models, 1D models. The 1D models, they are simpler. They give the evolution of mean pressure and flux in arteries. It's a system of hyperbolic equations that I will show you now, and the computational cost is lower. And then to take into account the rest of the circulation, you have small electrical circuits. You consider 0D models. 0D models give the evolution in time of mean pressure and flux in wide compartments. Is a system of ODEs, ordinary differential equations, so much simpler, and the computational cost is very low. Of course, when you consider the this has been considered in this sense. So in the past, when researchers start to study the circulatory system, the computers were not developed, and they started the study of the circulatory system by solving systems of ODEs, then by solving systems of 1D models, and then by studying 3D models with the development of the the solvers and the computers, the technology, of course. So 1D model. How do we obtain a 1D model? A 1D model is obtained by integrating the 3D model over a cross section. You suppose, for instance, a cylinder, so a portion of suppose that you have a blood vessel, a part of it is very regular, very nice, a cylinder, and you integrate over a cross section. You suppose that the initial terms are negligible and the elastic stresses in the radial direction are dominant, and then under certain conditions you obtain this system where there are some unknowns here that we give names to this. A is the area, Q is the flux given by this expression, and P is the mean pressure given by this expression. Okay, related to the previous unknowns, velocity and pressure. Okay, you obtain only two equations, in fact, and so K is a friction parameter. You obtain two equations, but you have three unknowns, A, Q, and P. And in order to solve a system of three unknowns, you need three equations. So this is an arbitrary equation that is written here, is an algebraic expression that relates the pressure with the area. And it's coherent with the rest, and so this is an algebraic expression that it has been proved that it's okay. So this is the 1D model. It's an hyperbolic system, and it allows for the kind of domain decomposition it's possible to use to decompose the small arteries in segments like this. Okay, then the 0D models are the so-called 0D lumped parameter models. You see, this is the 1D. You see, and 0D models, they are equivalent to a system of ODEs equivalent to electric circuits. But so if we are talking about fluids, then we need to make an equivalence between the fluid dynamics and the electric circuits. And so the pressure corresponds to voltage, the flow rate to current, the blood viscosity is the resistance, the blood inertia inductance, and the wall compliance, it's the capacitance. So, for instance, the RLC, like this circuit here, RLC, it's a circuit for a large artery. an RC circuit accounts for capillary bed, and this can describe compartments of all type in the circulatory system. Okay, so this is a kind of full geometrical multiscale where you have everything. So you have here, in fact, so people who start studying the circulatory system, they started studying the circulatory system by this kind of network of electric circuits, then they coupled with 1D, and then finally with 3D. Okay, so I'm already late. I need to go very quickly, isn't it, Elias?
Sim, já estamos acima da hora, tem mais uns 5 minutos.
Ui! I need to, tenho de falar dos... So I will go fast now. Okay. Now let me, so this is for the coupling. I will go to the aneurysms. Let me talk now about the aneurysms and the application to because I said that I will talk about medical application. So the medical application is that I have chosen is the simulation-based medicine, computational hemodynamics of cerebral aneurysms. Everybody knows what is a cerebral aneurysm, and I talked about at the beginning, and how computational fluid dynamics can help in the prognosis and therapy planning of an aneurysm. So this is the circle of Willis, is the location of the aneurysms in the brain. This is the circle of Willis here. It's a polygon of Willis. There are this dilation here. You can see there are more. When there is another here, it's usually in the bifurcations. And when there is one, there is more than one. And it's usually found in the bifurcation and curved segments. They are the most common cause of hemorrhagic strokes. There are no symptoms until rupture. And it's necessary to better understand the mechanism for the formation and treatment. And the detection of these aneurysms, it's very invasive because it's necessary to introduce a contrast liquid in the vessels, and only if absolutely necessary, the medical doctors do that. So it's important to study when there are some symptoms, to study by other means. So there are some factors so that like some asymmetry of the circle of Willis and cerebral atherosclerosis, some hypertension that can be associated to the development and rupture, non-uniform distribution, and the fact that they are situated in the apex of bifurcation and outer bands of curved segments. For instance, this lady has an asymmetry in both eyes, and so the medical doctors, the neuroradiologists or neurosurgeon, he looked at her and saw immediately that there is an asymmetry and that the lady should have something. She had a very strong headache, so she should have an aneurysm, and immediately he did a special observation. So the aneurysm can be treated or then by surgery. The treatment is by clipping if the neck is conveniently small, and then or coiling. They introduce this coil. The idea is to dry the aneurysm to avoid the circulation here, because if there is blood circulation, the aneurysm can rupture. And after the coiling, then it's necessary to introduce a stent here in order to reestablish the circulation. So here there is a picture where you can see better the location of the aneurysms. So it's a multifactorial problem. You can see that essentially there are factors like clinical factors, perianeurysm, so environmental factors, biomechanical factors, hemodynamics factors. And essentially, there is a controversial between, I told you that wall shear stress is very important. And there is a controversial between low wall shear stress and high wall shear stress. So we measure the wall shear stress, but from one side, the low wall shear stress induces endothelial dysfunction and remodeling, and the high wall shear stress can can have as a result a wall weakness, and so both can the result of both can give rupture. So that's why there is. So we don't know exactly what is the reason for the initiation, but and the growth, but then in stabilization and rupture. But so both low and wall shear and high shear stress, wall shear stress, can have as a consequence rupture. And that's why it's necessary to do many observations and to compare and to do a statistics of the results in order to arrive to some conclusions. So the idea is, in fact, to do a scan, to obtain the image. So this is a pipeline to obtain the geometry, mesh generation, to have the modeling, hemodynamics modeling, to do the simulations, to obtain the results, the flow visualization, and then to show the medical doctors and to measure and to obtain the results. So here you can see a rotation, computational tomography and geography, where you can see the aneurysm. Then after obtaining the aneurysms, you have the several projections. You cut the aneurysm in order to detect the best portion, the best location. Then you consider the steady and the steady inflow flux profiles versus time. And then you can decide that you want to consider just this part, or then to take into account that there are also some branches, and these branches, in order to account for these branches, you need to couple them with 1D models. 1D models by accounting for appropriate boundary conditions to couple with the 1D models you see here. And to account for this coupling, it's necessary to consider appropriate boundary conditions. Okay, so this is software for doing some of these things. So automatic and manual segmentations, ITK snap, surface smoothing suitable for simulations is Mesh Lab. This has been done by a student, used by a student. Creation of extension is Mesh Mixer, and GMesh for meshing. This is free on the web. So I have some simulations to show you. So with ParaView, this is offline post-processing, has been obtained with ParaView. You have here the link. So here you have a representation of a cardiac cycle at the inflow section, so the systole, then the diastole, and the end of the cycle. And you have here the three images. using 800 times steps per cycle. And the results were obtained at during the third cycle. At the bottom row, you have the velocity streamlines colored according to the velocity magnitude. So this is the lower and the red is the higher velocity magnitude. So I have now here, the top row corresponds to the velocity profile, and the rows are scaled and colored according to the velocity magnitude. Again, this is the lower, this is the highest. And here is the wall shear stress. Again, this is the lower and this is the highest. Now I repeat, you can see that there are different kinds of aneurysms. All of them have been provided by the images by a medical doctor from the University of Coimbra. Some of them corresponds to patients that had rupture, others had no rupture. So this is just to show you different kinds. It's some pictures just to show you that there are different kinds. These ones could not be treated. They had been submitted to surgery, and before surgery, they have been studied. Okay, so this is just to show you the pictures and the different forms. Okay, and now there are other hemodynamical indicators that can be derived from the wall shear stress. You see here the wall shear stress. This is called the time average wall shear stress. This is the relative residence time. It's the inverse. And this is a number which is very important. It's a non-dimensional number that varies between 0 and 1/2. 0 indicates that there is no oscillation, and 1/2 there is the maximum oscillation, identifies the regions of the vessel wall subjects to the highly oscillating wall shear stress. And so we also studied these values for all these aneurysms, and I have more images, but I decided not to show you here, and movies and so on of these things, but I don't want to bother you more and show you just the cover of this book that I talked about. And thank you for your attention. Sorry for being so long.